first time Savannah Ashford returned to a school party after the accident, the room did what rich rooms often do when they are uncomfortable. It smiled. Not warmly, not honestly, just enough to cover the sound of people staring. The chandeliers above Ashford Hall were polished until every crystal caught the light. The long windows showed the gardens outside, where lanterns hung from old oak trees, and the fountain had been turned pink and gold for the spring gala. Waiters moved between tables with silver trays. Parents in tailored suits laughed softly over champagne. Students from Winslow Academy stood in clusters near the orchestra, pretending they had not all turned their heads the second Savannah came through the doors. She entered slowly, not because she wanted attention, but because the room had been designed for people who walked through it without thinking. The carpet was thick. The doorway had a slight lip no one had noticed until a wheelchair met it. Her father had ordered a ramp installed that morning, but the ramp was narrow, and the brass edge caught under one wheel. For a moment, the most powerful girl in the room was stuck at the entrance of her own family's gala. Savannah did not panic. She placed one hand on the wheel, adjusted her angle, and pushed again. Her face stayed calm. Her dark blue dress fell neatly across her lap, and her hair was pinned back with a small silver clip shaped like a horse. It was the only thing she wore from before the accident, before the headlines, before people started lowering their voices when they said her name, before a girl who could ride a horse over a 6-foot jump without blinking learned how many people confused a wheelchair with weakness. Across the ballroom, Trevor Hamilton saw her. He was leaning against the edge of the dessert table, surrounded by boys who laughed before they knew what was funny. Trevor always made people wait for him, listen to him, move around him. He was 18, handsome in the way expensive families teach their sons to be handsome, with perfect cuffs, a perfect watch, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. His father, Grant Hamilton, owned more hotels than most people could name. His mother sat on museum boards and used charity like jewelry. Trevor had grown up believing every room had a center, and that center was wherever he happened to stand. Savannah had once been the only person at Winslow Academy who did not orbit him. That had bothered him more than anyone knew. Before the accident, Savannah Ashford had been quick, sharp, and impossible to impress. She was the billionaire's daughter, yes, but she hated being introduced that way. She loved horses, old maps, bad coffee, and beating boys like Trevor at debate tournaments without raising her voice. She was the girl teachers trusted, younger students followed, and photographers waited for at charity events, because she never looked like she was trying to be photographed. Trevor had wanted her attention. Then he had wanted her approval. When he did not get either, he wanted her silence. Now, as Savannah crossed the ballroom in her wheelchair for the first time in nearly a year, Trevor watched her with the look of someone being handed a target. At the same moment, a boy in a black server's vest stepped out from behind a pillar carrying a tray of sparkling water. His name was Wesley Williams. Most of the students in the room knew him, but not in the way they knew Trevor. They knew Wesley as the scholarship kid who kept his blazer too clean because he could not afford another one. They knew him as the boy who ate lunch in the library when his cafeteria account ran low. They knew him as the student who never joined weekend trips, never bought school hoodies, and always left campus fast after last bell because he had a bus to catch and a job waiting. That night, he was not wearing the Winslow uniform. He was wearing borrowed black pants, a white shirt that pinched at the neck, and shoes polished so hard they looked almost new. He had been hired by the catering company for the gala because he needed money for his mother's prescriptions, and because dignity in his house had always meant taking the work that came. He had told himself he would keep his head down. He had told himself it did not matter if classmates ordered drinks from him like they had never shared a hallway. He had told himself that one night of swallowing pride was worth the envelope of cash he would bring home after midnight. Then Savannah's wheel caught on the edge of the carpet again, and Trevor Hamilton's laugh cut through the music. It was not loud at first. That was what made it worse. It was controlled, performative, offered to the people around him like an invitation. One by one, the boys near him smiled. A girl covered her mouth. Someone lifted a phone, not fully, just enough. Trevor pushed away from the table and walked towards Savannah with the lazy confidence of someone who had never been asked to consider the damage he left behind. He did not greet her like a classmate. He circled her like an exhibit. He looked at the silver clip in her hair, then at the wheels of her chair, then back at the crowd, making sure he had an audience before he let his cruelty become public. He spoke with a soft, polished voice he used around teachers, but the meaning landed like glass on marble. He welcomed her back as if she were a broken decoration returned to the family collection. He wondered aloud whether Ashford Hall had widened the doors for her, or whether everyone was expected to step aside now. He said it with just enough humor that cowards could pretend it was a joke. Savannah's hands tightened once around her wheels. Only once. Her father was across the room, speaking with trustees. Her older brother was outside taking a call. Her nurse had stayed near the entrance because Savannah had insisted she could move through the party herself. For one long second, she sat alone beneath the chandeliers, while the room waited to see what kind of pain was acceptable to laugh at. Trevor leaned closer. He lowered his voice, but not enough. He reminded Savannah that she used to arrive at parties on a horse, and now she needed staff to clear a path. He said the accident had at least done one useful thing. It had finally slowed her down. A few people laughed. Not many. Enough. Wesley heard it from 10 feet away. He felt the tray tilt in his hand. The glasses trembled, sending little rings of water across the silver. He had worked that afternoon through a headache, through hunger, through the humiliation of a sophomore snapping his fingers at him for more ice. He had promised himself he would not react to anything. But there are moments when silence stops being survival and becomes permission. Wesley looked at Savannah. He expected her to look humiliated. He expected tears, maybe anger, maybe the blank stare people use when they are trying not to give a bully the satisfaction of seeing blood. Instead, Savannah was watching Trevor the way a person watches a locked door they have already found the key to. That unsettled Wesley. Then Trevor reached down and tapped the handle of Savannah's wheelchair with 2 fingers, as if testing the metal. That was when Wesley stepped forward. He set the tray on the nearest table with care. The glasses clinked softly, almost politely, and the sound made several heads turn. Wesley moved between Trevor and Savannah without raising his fists, without shouting, without performing bravery for the room. He simply placed his body where Trevor's cruelty had been standing. The orchestra kept playing for 2 more measures, then faltered. Trevor looked at Wesley's vest, then at his face, and smiled. Not because he was amused, because he had been given an easier target. Wesley told him quietly enough that people had to lean in, that if Trevor wanted to impress the room, he could start by moving away from the wheelchair and learning the difference between power and manners. The words were not dramatic, they were not perfect. Wesley's voice shook slightly on the last part. He hated that it did. He hated that his hands still smelled like lemon polish and dishwater. He hated that he could feel every expensive eye in the ballroom measuring the distance between his borrowed vest and Trevor's tailored jacket. But he did not move. Trevor's smile thinned. He asked Wesley whether the catering company had started letting the help give speeches. He reminded him that servers were not paid to have opinions. Then, with a glance toward Savannah, he said maybe Wesley had finally found someone in the room who needed rescuing more than he did. That should have been the end of it. In rooms like that, people usually understand the signal. The poor boy backs away. The rich boy laughs. The injured girl swallows the insult. The music resumes. Everyone goes home relieved that the evening's ugliness did not require courage from them. But Wesley had carried too many quiet things for too long. He had carried grocery bags up 3 flights when his mother's hands were too stiff from cleaning houses. He had carried textbooks on buses where other students from Winslow pretended not to see him. He had carried the memory of a night at Briar Hollow Stables when rain hit the roof like thrown gravel, when a horse screamed when a girl's body lay twisted in wet sand, and when powerful men arrived before the police and decided what the story would be. He had carried one more thing, too. A secret. Not the kind that makes a person powerful, the kind that makes him tired. Wesley looked at Trevor, and in that crowded ballroom, with Savannah just behind him and the Ashford family crest shining on the wall, he said Trevor should be careful talking about accidents he knew too much about. The room changed. Not loudly, not all at once. It was more like the air had been pulled through a narrow opening. Trevor's friends stopped smiling. Grant Hamilton across the ballroom turned his head. Savannah's father paused mid-sentence. A trustee lowered her glass. Phones that had been raised for amusement stayed raised for something else. Trevor stared at Wesley. For the first time that night, he looked less like a prince and more like a boy who had heard a floorboard crack under his feet. Savannah closed her eyes for half a breath. Then she opened them and looked at Wesley as if he had just stepped onto a bridge both of them had been afraid to cross. To understand why that sentence mattered, you have to go back 11 months. Before the wheelchair, before the gala, before Wesley wore a server's vest in a room full of classmates, Briar Hollow Stables had been Savannah's favorite place in the world. It sat on the far edge of the Ashford estate, where the lawns gave way to old pasture and white fences ran along the hills. Her father had built the stables for her mother, who had loved horses before illness took her in Savannah's childhood. After that, Savannah had treated the place as something more than a hobby. It was memory. It was freedom. It was the one place where being an Ashford mattered less than how gently you held the reins. Savannah had been riding since she was 5. She was not reckless. That mattered later, though too many people ignored it. She checked straps twice. She knew which horses disliked wind, which ones startled at plastic bags, which ones relaxed if you hummed under your breath. She kept notes on training, feed, weather, and tack, because she trusted details more than luck. Her favorite horse was a gray mare named Juniper. Juniper had a soft nose, proud ears, and a habit of testing any rider who treated her like equipment instead of a living thing. Savannah adored her for that. People called the mare difficult, but Savannah said Juniper was honest. If you were impatient, she showed you. If you were cruel, she remembered. Trevor hated that horse. He hated most things that did not obey him quickly. That spring, Winslow Academy had held a private equestrian weekend at Briar Hollow for donors, students, and families. It was supposed to be harmless, a little riding demonstration, a scholarship fundraiser, a chance for parents to admire one another's children under white tents. Grant Hamilton attended because the Hamiltons were negotiating a development partnership with the Ashfords. Trevor attended because Savannah was there, and because he never missed an event where admiration might be distributed. Wesley was there too, though not as a guest. His father, Marcus Williams, had worked at Briar Hollow for years. He was a stable hand, trainer, repairman, early morning feeder, late night watcher, and the kind of person horses trusted before people did. He had taught Savannah how to listen for the change in a horse's breathing before a spook. He had taught Wesley how to clean tack until leather softened under his fingers. He had taught both of them that animals tell the truth long before humans admit it. That weekend, Wesley helped in the stable because extra hands were needed, and because his father's knees were getting worse. He remembered Trevor arriving late, wearing riding boots, so new the soles looked untouched. He remembered Trevor laughing when Juniper tossed her head away from him. He remembered Savannah telling him calmly that Juniper did not like being jerked by the reins. Trevor smiled at her then, but it was the same kind of smile he wore at the gala months later, a smile that kept score. There had been tension all day. Small things, easy things to dismiss if you wanted a clean story afterward. Trevor complaining that Savannah got the best horse because it was her family's stable. Trevor telling younger students that anybody could ride well with private trainers. Trevor making a joke about scholarship kids cleaning up after horses while families like his funded the school. Trevor pushing too hard in every conversation then stepping back just before an adult noticed. Savannah refused to be pulled into it. That made him angrier. By late afternoon, storm clouds rolled over the hills. The official demonstration was shortened. Guests moved toward the tents. Staff started bringing horses in. Savannah decided to take Juniper for one final slow lap in the covered arena before the rain got heavy. Her father had been called away to an urgent business call. Marcus Williams was checking a loose stall latch. Wesley was carrying feed buckets near the tack room. Trevor was supposed to be with the other students. He was not. Wesley saw him near Juniper's stall. At the time, it did not feel like proof of anything. Trevor had been wandering all day. He had no respect for staff-only areas. Wesley assumed he was doing what boys like Trevor did, going wherever he wanted, because no one had taught him doors could mean no. But Wesley noticed something. Trevor was holding a narrow, black riding crop that did not belong to him. Not unusual by itself. People borrowed equipment. Students touched things they should not touch. But this crop had a strip of silver tape near the handle because Marcus had marked it as damaged. The leather flap at the end had split, and when it snapped, it made a sharper sound than normal. Marcus had set it aside that morning to repair. Wesley saw Trevor run his thumb over the tape. Then Trevor saw Wesley. For a second, neither boy moved. Trevor's face changed first. He gave Wesley that same lazy smile and told him, without quite saying it, to mind his place. Wesley was 15 then, thin from a growth spurt, still learning how much anger a poor kid was allowed to show in a wealthy room. He looked away. That moment bothered him later. It bothered him for months. He looked away. A little while after that, Savannah rode Juniper into the covered arena. Rain began hitting the roof, soft at first, then harder. Most guests were under the tents by then, laughing, eating small sandwiches, pretending the storm was charming. The arena lights flickered once. Marcus called out that they should bring Juniper in after one lap. Savannah raised a hand to show she had heard. Juniper moved beautifully at first, slow, controlled, relaxed. Savannah's posture was easy. Her shoulders were down. She was not showing off. She was just letting the mare stretch after a day of noise. Then came a sound that did not belong to rain, a sharp crack. Not thunder. Closer. Meaner. Juniper reared. Savannah leaned forward, trying to calm her, but the mare twisted toward the open side gate. Another crack snapped through the arena. Someone shouted. Juniper bolted. Savannah reached for balance, but the saddle slipped strangely to one side. It happened so fast that memory turned it into pieces. Gray body, dark footing, a flash of blue jacket, Savannah's hand striking the rail, then her body hitting the ground. Afterward, everyone talked about the storm. They talked about the horse being nervous. They talked about riding risks. They talked about tragedy and the soft, expensive language people use when they want grief to remain tidy. But Wesley remembered the sound, and he remembered Trevor near the tack room with the damaged crop. He tried to tell someone that night. His father told him to wait until they knew more, not because Marcus wanted to hide anything, but because he understood the world they were standing in. Marcus had spent his life around people who could destroy a poor family with one polite phone call. He knew accusation required proof, and Wesley had none. Then the Hamiltons acted first. By morning, whispers had started that the saddle had been improperly checked. By afternoon, Marcus Williams' name appeared in conversations it had no business appearing in. By the end of the week, the official internal report suggested staff negligence may have contributed to the accident. May have, those two words, ruined the Williams family. Marcus was suspended, then quietly dismissed. The Ashfords did not publicly blame him, but they were buried in hospital decisions, legal pressure, and the horror of Savannah's injuries. Grant Hamilton offered sympathy with one hand and influence with the other. The school wanted calm. The stable's insurer wanted a simple conclusion. The newspapers wanted the phrase, tragic accident, and moved on. Marcus Williams never recovered from the shame. He found work where he could, But horse people talk, and rich horse people talk in ways that close doors without leaving fingerprints. His knee worsened. His blood pressure rose. Wesley's mother picked up extra cleaning jobs. Wesley got a scholarship to Winslow, renewed by grades alone, then spent each day walking through the halls with Trevor Hamilton, who seemed lighter than ever. Savannah was in the hospital for weeks, then rehab, then home. She had broken parts of her body no apology could repair. Her spinal injury changed the shape of every morning. She learned new routines under fluorescent lights. She learned that progress could be measured in inches and still cost everything. She learned how people praised her for being brave, when what they really meant was that they were relieved she did not make them uncomfortable. But Savannah also learned something else. Pain can slow the body without dulling the mind. In the first months after the accident, she said very little. People mistook that for acceptance. Trevor mistook it for defeat. Even her father, blinded by fear and guilt, mistook it for fragility. But Savannah was watching. She asked for copies of reports. She asked for stable logs. She asked which tack had been checked, who had signed which sheet, who had been near the arena, which cameras failed, which cameras worked, and why a side gate had been left unlatched during a storm. The adults around her answered gently at first, then carefully, then not at all. That was how she knew something was wrong. One detail would not settle. Juniper had not simply spooked at thunder. Savannah knew that horse. Juniper startled, yes, but she did not bolt blind unless provoked, again and again. And the saddle had not been loose when Savannah mounted. She remembered the feeling of the girth check. She remembered Marcus's weathered hand tugging the strap. She remembered his quiet nod. Then slowly, pieces began returning. The crack. The second crack. A figure near the open side gate. Not clear enough to accuse, enough to haunt. Savannah began requesting old footage from cameras around Briar Hollow. Some files were missing. One camera had gone down in the storm. Another had been overwritten before anyone saved it. But an exterior camera near the delivery lane had caught something small, Trevor leaving the stable area minutes before the fall, carrying nothing in his hands, then returning later without his jacket, his hair wet, his face pale. It was not enough. The Hamilton lawyers could explain it. They could explain anything. Then Wesley found the crop. It happened 3 months after Marcus lost his job. Wesley was helping a former Briar Hollow groom clear old equipment from a storage shed behind the arena. He was not supposed to be there, but the groom liked Marcus and knew Wesley needed odd work. In a cracked plastic bin beneath moldy saddle pads, Wesley saw the strip of silver tape, the damaged black crop. He picked it up and felt the old anger run through his arm. The end was split wider now, dirt crusted near the handle, and under that dirt pressed into the leather were tiny pale marks that looked like grit at first. Wesley almost threw it away. Then he remembered Savannah on the ground. He wrapped the crop in an old feed sack and took it home. For weeks he did nothing with it. He was not a detective. He was a student with homework, 2 jobs, and a father who could barely look at anything from Briar Hollow without going silent. He hid the crop in the back of his closet, behind a box of winter clothes. Then Savannah called him. Not directly at first. She sent an email from her school account asking if he would be willing to answer a few questions about the day of the accident. Wesley read it 6 times before replying. He almost ignored it. He was afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of dragging his father into more shame, afraid of Trevor, afraid of being the poor kid who accused a rich kid and learned how fast truth can be priced out of court. But Savannah's email did not sound like a billionaire's daughter demanding help. It sounded like someone standing in a dark room, asking if anyone else had seen the door. They met in the quiet study room behind the Winslow Library. Savannah arrived in her wheelchair with a notebook balanced on her lap. Wesley arrived with his backpack clutched too tightly and the feeling that every camera in the hallway was watching him. At first, they were awkward with each other. They had known each other for years in that school way where proximity pretends to be acquaintance. She had been kind to him before the accident, but kindness from a distance can still leave distance. That day, the distance changed. Savannah did not ask him to rescue her. She did not ask him to feel sorry for her. She asked what he saw. So he told her. Not all at once. The words came unevenly. He told her about Trevor near the tack room, the damaged crop, the silver tape, the sound in the arena, the pressure on his father, the storage shed, the thing hidden in his closet because he did not know what proof was supposed to look like when nobody wanted it. Savannah listened without interrupting. When he finished, she did not cry. She looked down at her notebook, touched the edge of the page, and asked him whether he still had the crop. The next day, Wesley brought it, wrapped in a towel. Savannah did not touch it immediately. She stared at it for a long time. Then she took a photograph and sent it to someone named Dr. Lena Ortiz, an equine behavior specialist her mother had once trusted. After that, things moved quietly, very quietly. Savannah understood the Hamiltons better than Wesley did. She knew Trevor's family would not fall because a poor boy said he saw something. She knew they would bury emotion, attack memory, question motives, and turn every bruise into a debate. So she did not accuse them. She built a record. She found the tack maintenance sheet showing the crop had been marked for repair that morning and removed from active use. She found a text from a student joking that Trevor was angry after Savannah embarrassed him near the horses. She found a weather report showing the storm had not produced thunder at the moment Juniper bolted. She found a veterinary note saying Juniper showed signs of being struck or startled from the left side near the open gate. Wesley found something else. A video. Not the accident itself. That would have been too easy, and life had not been easy for either of them. It was a short clip recorded by a freshman that afternoon, meant to capture the storm rolling over the arena. The freshman had posted it briefly, then deleted it when the accident happened, because her parents told her not to get involved. But deleted things do not always disappear. A copy remained in an old group chat passed around with nervous comments and then forgotten. In the corner of the clip, partly blocked by rain, a figure stood near the side gate, a boy in a dark riding jacket. His face was not clear, but the jacket had a crest on the sleeve. Hamilton Equestrian Club, and in his hand, for less than a second, something black snapped downward. The clip did not show Savannah falling. It did not show Trevor's face. It did show enough to make the official story tremble. Savannah sent it to a private investigator her father did not know she had hired through her mother's old attorney. That was the first time Wesley realized Savannah had not been waiting for someone to give her power back. She had been using the power she still had, quietly, carefully, from a chair everyone else treated like an ending. By the time the spring gala arrived, Savannah and Wesley knew three things. They knew Marcus Williams had been blamed for something he had not done. They knew Trevor Hamilton had been near the arena with a damaged crop moments before Savannah fell. And they knew Grant Hamilton's company was about to sign a massive partnership with Ashford Holdings, a partnership that depended on trust, reputation, and a public image of family values. The gala was supposed to celebrate that partnership. That was why the Hamiltons were there. That was why photographers were there. That was why Trevor wore the family crest on his cufflinks and smiled as if history always bent toward him. Savannah had not planned to expose him that night. Not exactly. Her father's legal team was still reviewing evidence. The investigator was still tracing the original deleted video. Savannah wanted more than embarrassment. She wanted the record corrected. She wanted Marcus's name cleared. She wanted the people who had traded truth for convenience to answer in daylight. But Trevor could not help himself. Cruelty, when it has been protected long enough, begins to believe it is charm. So he mocked her in front of the room, and Wesley stepped between them. After Wesley warned him to be careful talking about accidents he knew too much about, Trevor recovered quickly. That was his talent. He adjusted his cuffs, laughed once, and tried to make Wesley look unstable. He suggested the waiter had spent too much time polishing glasses and imagining conspiracies. He looked around for support, and some people gave it to him, because people with money are often granted the first version of reality. Grant Hamilton crossed the ballroom with a smile that had already turned hard at the edges. He placed one hand on Trevor's shoulder, not affectionately, but as a warning to stop speaking. Then he looked at Wesley, as if staff should not have names. He asked the catering manager to remove him. The manager, a nervous man who knew exactly which families paid invoices on time, moved quickly toward Wesley. He apologized to the Hamiltons before he even understood what had happened. He told Wesley to go to the kitchen. He said it under his breath, but everyone near them heard the panic in it. Wesley felt the old instinct rise. Step back. Apologize. Protect the paycheck. Protect his mother's medicine. Protect his father from another call, another accusation, another door closing. His throat tightened. He thought of the envelope of cash he would lose. He thought of the bus ride home with nothing to show for the night but humiliation. He thought of his mother counting pills at the kitchen table, pretending not to worry him. Then Savannah moved. She rolled forward, not behind Wesley, not away from Trevor, but beside him. The movement was small. The meaning was not. She looked at the catering manager and told him Wesley was her guest now. No one had expected that. Not Wesley, not Trevor, not the manager, not the guests who had already decided this would become another awkward moment smoothed over with music. Savannah turned her chair slightly so she faced the room. The chandelier light caught the silver horseclip in her hair. For the first time all evening, people stopped looking at the wheelchair and started looking at her face. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She said there had been an accusation in the room, and since Trevor had chosen to make her accident a public joke, perhaps it was fair for the truth to become public too. That was when her father arrived. Edmund Ashford was not a man people ignored. He had built companies, funded hospitals, bought newspapers back from collapse, and intimidated senators without ever sounding impolite. But when he reached his daughter, he looked less like a billionaire than a father who had just realized his child had been carrying a locked room inside her. He asked Savannah what truth she meant. She looked at him then, and Wesley saw the cost of the moment pass across her face. Not fear, not regret, something heavier. The ache of telling someone you love that their grief had made them miss what was right in front of them. Savannah told her father that Marcus Williams did not cause her accident. The room went silent in a different way. Before it had been scandal silence. Now it was history opening. Grant Hamilton's hand tightened on Trevor's shoulder. Trevor's jaw moved once as if he wanted to speak and could not find the safest lie fast enough. Savannah continued. She explained in calm, careful sentences that the investigation after her accident had been incomplete. She said evidence had been ignored because it was easier to blame a stable worker than challenge a family sitting at the donor's table. She said a damaged riding crop had disappeared from the tack room and later been found hidden in a storage bin. She said exterior footage placed Trevor near the stable minutes before the accident, though he had claimed to be with other students. Trevor laughed then, too loudly. He said Savannah had spent too much time alone with lawyers and pain medication. He suggested Wesley had fed her a story because his father wanted a payout. He tried to turn the room toward class before the room could turn toward truth. It was a mistake. Because Wesley had been ashamed of many things in his life. His father was not one of them. The boy who had been willing to lose a paycheck now stepped fully into the light. He did not shout. He did not accuse with wild hands or shaking rage. He spoke with the exhausted steadiness of someone who had repeated the truth in his head for almost a year and was finally done asking it to wait. He told the room Marcus Williams had checked that saddle twice. He told them he had seen Trevor with the damaged crop. He told them the sound that startled Juniper had not come from the storm. He told them his father had lost his job, his reputation, and nearly his health because people found it easier to believe a working man was careless than a rich boy was cruel. The phones were no longer half raised. They were up now. Recording. Trevor noticed. That was when his confidence began to crack. He looked at the phones, the trustees, the parents, the orchestra, frozen with instruments in hand. He looked at Savannah and realized she was not improvising. He looked at Wesley and realized the waiter had not simply defended a girl at a party. He had brought a year of buried memory into a room where the Hamilton name was supposed to shine. Grant tried to interrupt. He said this was not the time. He said legal matters should not be handled in public. He said the Ashford and Hamilton families had always respected one another, and respect meant discretion. That word landed badly. Discretion. It sounded too close to silence. Savannah turned toward him. She asked if discretion was what he called it when his team pressured witnesses not to speak. She asked if discretion was what he called it when Briar Hollow's staff were discouraged from challenging the first report. She asked if discretion was why Marcus Williams never received a formal apology, even after the maintenance logs contradicted the negligence claim. Grant's face changed, only slightly, but powerful men are often most frightening in the tiny movements, the jaw set, the blink delayed, the smile returning too late. He told Savannah she was upset. That was all. He told a young woman in a wheelchair in her own family's hall after his son had mocked the injury that changed her life that she was upset. Something shifted in the guests then, not because they had become noble all at once. Rooms do not become moral by magic. But people can sense when cruelty overreaches. They can feel when the lie they were willing to tolerate asks too much of them. A teacher from Winslow stepped forward, then another. A parent whispered that her daughter had mentioned Trevor leaving the tent that day. One of Trevor's friends turned pale. A trustee moved away from Grant Hamilton by 2 deliberate steps. Savannah reached into the side pocket of her chair and took out her phone. She did not wave it dramatically. She simply held it long enough for her father to see. On the screen was the restored clip. The grainy storm, the arena, the open gate, a dark jacket near the rail, the quick, cruel snap of something black, Juniper's head jerking toward the sound. The clip stopped before the fall. Mercifully, the room did not need to see Savannah hit the ground to understand what had been done. Edmund Ashford watched the video once, then again. No one spoke while he did. His face emptied of everything except concentration. That was almost worse than anger. Anger can scatter. Concentration gathers. When the clip ended the second time, he looked at Grant Hamilton. The partnership died before he said a word. Everyone in the room felt it. Grant did too. He tried to save it. Of course he did. He moved quickly into damage control, speaking about verification, context, youthful mistakes, possible misunderstandings, the danger of rushing to judgment. Each phrase was polished by years of boardrooms. Each one sounded smaller than the last. Then Savannah said there was more. Trevor's head snapped toward her. For the first time all night, he forgot to look bored. Savannah explained that the crop Wesley found had been tested. The partial prints were too degraded to be cleaned, but trace residue on the handle matched a leather treatment used by the Hamilton private stable, not Briar Hollow. More importantly, the silver tape on the handle matched the tack room repair log from that morning. The crop had not been in public circulation. Someone had taken it from the repair shelf. That did not prove everything by itself. But truth rarely arrives as one thunderclap. It arrives as weight, one detail on another, one lie failing to carry the next. Then Wesley removed his phone from his pocket with a hand that shook just enough to show what courage had cost him. He opened an audio file. His father had not wanted it played. Marcus was not a man who liked attention, and humiliation had made him private in a way pain often does. But he had given Wesley permission that afternoon after Savannah called to say she would attend the gala. The audio was not from the accident. It was from 2 weeks after. Marcus had recorded a meeting with a representative from Hamilton Legal, a man who spoke smoothly about avoiding public conflict. The voice never directly threatened him. It did not need to. It spoke of insurance exposure, employment references, school scholarships, and how accusations against prominent families could become costly for everyone. It offered Marcus a small settlement in exchange for agreeing not to challenge the internal report. Marcus did not take it. That was why he lost more than a job. As the audio played through the ballroom speakers because Savannah had quietly asked the sound technician to connect Wesley's phone, people stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. They heard the machinery behind the lie. They heard how a working man had been cornered with polite language. They heard how the truth had been made expensive on purpose. They heard the part where the representative suggested Wesley's scholarship at Winslow could become complicated if his family created trouble. Wesley stared at the floor during that part. He had known it was coming. It still made his face burn. Savannah reached out, not dramatically, and placed her hand over his wrist for 1 second. That was all. 1 second. Enough to remind him that the shame was not his. Trevor tried one final escape. He said the audio proved nothing about him. He said his father's lawyers handled many things. He said Savannah had always hated him. He said Wesley was jealous. He said Juniper was unstable. He said accidents happen. The more he spoke, the younger he sounded. Not young in the innocent way. Young in the way of someone who had been shielded so long that consequence felt like betrayal. Then a voice came from the edge of the crowd. It belonged to a girl named Maribel Chen, one of Trevor's closest friends that year. She had been quiet all night, standing near the dessert table with her arms folded, her face drained of color. Maribel was not brave by habit. She liked safety. She liked invitations. She liked being near power, not under its wheels. But guilt had been working on her for 11 months. She stepped forward with tears standing in her eyes and told the room that Trevor had joked after the accident that Savannah would never beat him at anything again. The words did not need to be shouted. They landed everywhere. Maribel said he had been drunk on attention that day, angry that Savannah had corrected him in front of guests. She said he had gone toward the arena to scare Juniper, not to hurt Savannah, at least not in the way that happened. She said afterward he was terrified, and Grant Hamilton's people told the group to keep quiet, because no one wanted a ruined life over what they called a stupid mistake. A stupid mistake. Savannah's hands rested open in her lap. Her face did not collapse. She had imagined many versions of this confession. None of them gave her back the morning before the accident. None of them gave Marcus his lost year. None of them erased the ramp at the ballroom entrance, or the strangers who now looked at her chair and finally understood it was not the most broken thing in the room. Trevor turned on Maribel. He called her a liar. He called her weak. He said she was only speaking because she wanted attention. But the old magic was gone. His words did not arrange the room anymore. They fell at his feet. Edmund Ashford stepped between Trevor and his daughter then. He did not raise his hand. He did not threaten. He simply looked at Grant Hamilton and told him that every agreement between their families was suspended immediately, pending legal review. The Ashford Foundation would also open an independent investigation into Winslow Academy's handling of the incident, including witness intimidation, scholarship threats, and staff scapegoating. The headmaster, who had spent the evening trying to become invisible, looked as if the floor had vanished beneath him. Grant Hamilton began speaking again, but Edmund did not let him finish. He said Marcus Williams would receive a formal public apology by morning. He said his employment record would be corrected. He said every person who participated in burying evidence would be named to the proper authorities. Then he looked at Trevor, and the billionaire's voice lost its boardroom polish. He said his daughter had been forced to rebuild her life while Trevor practiced looking innocent. That sentence did what anger could not. It stripped Trevor of elegance. Security arrived quietly. The Hamiltons were not dragged out. Their world did not work that way. They were escorted with the careful politeness reserved for people whose disgrace still wears expensive shoes. But everyone watched them leave. That was the part Trevor could not bear. He had entered the gala expecting admiration. He left through the side doors, while a room full of phones recorded his father whispering at him to say nothing. Wesley expected the night to end there. He expected to be dismissed, thanked awkwardly, maybe pulled into legal statements he could not afford to understand. He expected the world to correct itself just enough to protect its own balance. But Savannah was not finished. She asked the orchestra to stop packing up. The musicians, uncertain and pale, lifted their instruments again. Then Savannah turned her chair toward the center of the ballroom. There had been a dance planned for later that evening, a ceremonial first dance between student ambassadors. Savannah had once been chosen for it before the accident. After she was injured, the committee quietly removed the tradition from the program. No one told her directly. They thought that was kindness. Savannah had found out anyway. Now, in front of the same people who had watched Trevor mock her, she asked Wesley if he would take the first dance with her. A strange request, maybe. A risky one, not because she needed him to prove anything, not because dancing would make the night neat, but because Trevor had tried to make her body the center of shame, and Savannah wanted to make her choice the center of the room. Wesley did not know what to do. He was still in his server's vest. His hands were damp. He had never danced at a gala in his life. He looked around at the parents, the cameras, the chandeliers, the floor that probably cost more than his apartment building's yearly rent. Savannah smiled for the first time that night. Not brightly, honestly. She told him he only had to walk beside her. So he did. The orchestra began softly. Wesley walked beside Savannah's chair as she moved in a slow circle under the chandelier. No one laughed. No one spoke. The wheels made a faint sound over the polished floor. Wesley kept his pace, careful not leading, not pulling, just matching her. Savannah moved with the quiet skill of someone who had practiced turning in narrow hospital corridors, kitchen corners, bedroom doorways, and every place the world forgot to measure for her. Halfway through, Edmund Ashford looked away, not because he was ashamed of her, because he was ashamed of what he had missed. Marcus Williams was not at the gala that night. He was home in a recliner with his knee wrapped, waiting for Wesley to return. He had told his son not to start trouble. Then he had pressed the audio file into Wesley's hand anyway, because fathers often tell their children to be careful while quietly giving them the truth. When Wesley came home after midnight, he found Marcus awake. The apartment was small, lit by the yellow lamp near the window. Wesley's mother had fallen asleep at the kitchen table with a blanket over her shoulders. The television was muted. A cup of tea had gone cold beside Marcus's chair. Wesley stood in the doorway, still wearing the server's vest. For a moment he was 15 again, standing near the tack room, looking away from Trevor Hamilton, because he did not know courage could be delayed and still count. Then Marcus saw his face and understood. He did not ask whether they won. Winning was too small a word for what had happened. He only asked if Wesley told the truth. Wesley nodded. Marcus covered his eyes with one hand. The next morning, Winslow Academy woke up to a story it could not control. Clips from the gala spread through student chats first, then parent groups, then local news. By noon, the Hamilton-Ashford partnership had been suspended in every business column that cared about such things. By evening, Grant Hamilton's company had issued a statement about taking allegations seriously, which was the kind of sentence powerful people release when they are still deciding how much truth has escaped. But the deeper change came more slowly. It came in documents, in corrections, in signatures, in meetings where people who once spoke softly about tragedy now had to speak clearly about responsibility. The independent investigation found that Briar Hollow's initial report had been influenced by donor pressure. It found that staff statements favorable to Marcus had been minimized. It found that school officials had known students were discussing Trevor's involvement, but had discouraged further questions to avoid reputational harm. It found that Hamilton Legal had contacted witnesses in ways that were not technically illegal in every instance, but were unmistakably designed to frighten people with less money. That phrase appeared in the final report, designed to frighten people with less money. Wesley read it 3 times. It was the closest he had ever seen official language come to describing the shape of his life. Marcus Williams received a public apology from Briar Hollow Winslow Academy and the Ashford family. Edmund Ashford visited the Williams apartment himself, without cameras, without a press release, without anyone to witness whether he did the right thing. He sat in a kitchen chair with one wobbly leg and told Marcus he had failed him. Marcus did not make it easy. He did not rush to forgive. He did not say it was all right, because it had not been all right. He listened, hands folded over his bad knee, while Edmund offered back pay, medical support, restored references, and a formal position overseeing safety and staff training at Briar Hollow if Marcus ever wanted to return. Marcus asked for time. That was dignity too. Not every apology earns an immediate embrace. Some apologies are only the first brick in a road that should have been built long ago. As for Trevor, the consequences arrived in layers. Winslow Academy suspended him pending disciplinary review. The Equestrian Club expelled him. Colleges that had once treated his application like a formality began asking questions his family could not charm away. The Hamilton Company lost the Ashford partnership, then 2 more deals from investors who suddenly discovered concern for ethical leadership. Grant Hamilton fought publicly, then quietly, then not at all. Trevor's lawyers tried to argue intent. They said he meant only to scare the horse. Only. That word followed Savannah for days. Only scare the horse. Only humiliate the girl. Only protect the family. Only pressure the worker. Only bury the truth until everyone poor enough to be blamed became tired enough to disappear. The law took its time, as it often does. There were hearings, settlements, sealed portions, public portions, statements written by people who charged by the hour. Trevor did not go to prison in the dramatic way some people online demanded. Life is rarely shaped like comment sections, but he lost the thing he valued most: control of the room. For the first time, his name entered spaces before he did, not as a promise, but as a warning. People looked at him and remembered a girl under chandeliers, a waiter in a black vest, a video in the rain, and the sound of a lie breaking in public. That was its own kind of sentence. Savannah's healing did not become a miracle montage. She did not stand up at the end while everyone cried. She did not return to the exact life she had before, because stories that pretend recovery means erasing change are often only comforting to people who were not hurt. Her life remained complicated. There were difficult mornings. There were buildings that still treated access like an afterthought. There were old friends who disappeared because they did not know how to be around pain that did not resolve quickly. There were nights when she missed riding Juniper so fiercely she could barely breathe. But there were also new things. She returned to school on her own terms. She helped redesign Winslow's accessibility policies with a level of precision that made administrators sweat. She started a student fund for injured athletes and disabled students whose families could not afford equipment insurance refused to cover. She insisted the fund include transportation home modifications, mental health support, and legal assistance for families pressured into silence after accidents. She named it the Juniper Trust, not after herself. After the horse, everyone had tried to blame without understanding. Juniper, for the record, was not destroyed. Savannah had made sure of that from her hospital bed. The mare was retrained slowly by patient hands and eventually became part of a therapeutic riding program for children who needed to learn that fear and trust can exist in the same body. The first time Savannah visited her after the gala, Wesley went with her. So did Marcus. Briar Hollow looked different that morning. Not physically. The white fences were still white. The arena still smelled of hay leather and damp wood. But some places change when the truth is finally allowed to stand inside them. Savannah rolled to the pasture fence and waited. Juniper lifted her head from the grass. For a moment the mare did not move. Then she walked over slowly, ears flicking, nostrils soft. Savannah reached through the fence and placed her palm against Juniper's nose. No one spoke. Wesley stood a few feet back beside his father. Marcus leaned heavily on his cane, watching the girl and the horse with eyes that held too much for words. The stable had taken his good name for almost a year. Now it was giving him back a job title, back pay, and apologies. But the deeper thing, the thing no contract could fully restore, was happening quietly at the fence. Savannah looked at Marcus and told him she had always known he checked the saddle. Marcus tried to nod. He could not manage it at first, so he took off his cap and held it against his chest, and the morning wind moved through the pasture like something finally exhaling. Wesley's life changed too, though not in the simple way people expected. Yes, the Ashford Foundation covered his remaining school costs. Yes, his mother's prescriptions were handled through a medical grant Savannah insisted be written broadly enough to help other families, not just his. Yes, Marcus eventually returned to Briar Hollow, not as the man who cleaned up after other people's horses, but as the director of stable safety and staff advocacy. But Wesley still woke up early. He still worked weekends sometimes because work had shaped him, and pride does not vanish when help arrives. He still carried himself carefully in wealthy rooms, though now the care came with less fear. At school, people treated him differently, and that was not always comfortable. Some students praised him too loudly. Some apologized for things they had done in silence, hoping forgiveness would be quick and painless. Wesley learned to accept apologies without pretending they cost him nothing. Savannah helped him with that. Their friendship became one of those unlikely things people tried to turn into a headline and failed to understand. They were not a fairy tale. They were two young people tied by a terrible day, a buried truth, and a choice made under chandeliers when one of them could have looked away and did not. Sometimes they argued. Savannah could be stubborn, especially when she thought someone was helping too much. Wesley could be proud, especially when help felt too much like rescue. They learned each other carefully, the way people do when they have both survived being underestimated in opposite directions. He learned that she hated being called inspiring by people who had never asked whether the ramp worked. She learned that he hated charity that arrived with a photographer. Together they became difficult in the best way. Winslow Academy did not enjoy that. The school held assemblies about kindness after the investigation, because schools love broad words when specific ones are uncomfortable. Savannah and Wesley refused to let the conversation stay soft. They asked for policy. They asked for reporting systems outside donor influence. They asked why staff families could be threatened through scholarships. They asked why accessibility planning had been treated as decoration instead of infrastructure. They asked why students like Trevor had been corrected for dress code violations more often than cruelty. Change came because they made it embarrassing not to change. A new witness protection policy was created for student misconduct involving major donors. Financial aid decisions were separated from disciplinary matters. The gala committee added staff representation. Every major event venue was audited for accessibility before invitations went out. None of it made headlines the way Trevor's downfall had, but Savannah cared more about those quiet corrections than the viral clips. Justice, she told Wesley once, was not only the moment everyone gasped. Sometimes, justice was a door widened before anyone got stuck in it. A year after the gala, Ashford Hall hosted another spring event. Not a partnership gala this time, a scholarship dinner. The guest list was smaller. The lighting was warmer. The orchestra was replaced by a student jazz group that missed a few notes and somehow made the room feel more alive. The ramp at the entrance had been rebuilt into the architecture, smooth and wide enough that no one noticed it unless they needed it. which was the point. Savannah arrived early. She wore a green dress and the same silver horseclip, not because she was trapped in the past, but because she had decided some things taken by pain could be worn again without surrendering to it. She moved through the hall easily now, greeting students, staff, parents, and the stable workers invited as honored guests. Marcus Williams stood near the front with a name tag that read, Director of Equine Safety. He kept touching it, like he did not fully trust it to stay. Wesley stood beside him in a suit that actually fit. He had argued with Savannah for 2 weeks about who would pay for it. Savannah won, but only because she framed it as a scholarship requirement, and Wesley accused her of abusing bureaucracy with alarming skill. There was laughter that night, real laughter, the kind that does not need a target. Near the end of the dinner, Edmund Ashford stepped to the podium. He spoke briefly, which everyone appreciated. He announced the first recipients of the Juniper Trust, including 2 students recovering from sports injuries, 1 cafeteria worker's child who needed mobility equipment after surgery, and a young rider from a public school program who had lost access to training after her father's job disappeared. Benny asked Wesley to come forward. Wesley froze. Savannah had not warned him. He looked at her, betrayed and amused and terrified all at once. She only smiled and angled her chair toward the podium as if blocking escape. He walked up slowly. Edmund did not give him a medal. Wesley would have hated that. Instead, he handed him a small framed photograph. It showed the pasture at Briar Hollow Juniper, standing near the fence, Savannah's hand against the mare's nose. Marcus in the background with his cap against his chest, and Wesley looking at all of them, like he had not yet understood he belonged in the picture too. Under the photograph were 4 words. He did not look away. Wesley stared at those words for a long time. The room waited, but kindly this time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright. He did not make a speech. He only nodded once, the way his father did, when words would make something smaller than it was. Savannah watched him from below the stage and remembered the moment at the first gala when his tray had trembled in his hands. He could have stayed quiet. No one would have blamed him publicly. The room would have moved on. Trevor would have laughed. Savannah would have gone home with another scar no doctor could see. Marcus's name would have remained stained. The Hamiltons would have signed their partnership under chandeliers, while the truth sat outside like a worker no one had invited in. But Wesley had stepped forward, not because he was fearless, because he was afraid and moved anyway. That is the kind of courage people rarely teach children to recognize. The world praises confidence, volume, status, and victory. It points to people at podiums and calls them powerful. But sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one with the least protection, deciding in a single breath that another human being should not have to stand alone. Trevor Hamilton learned that too late. Savannah Ashford learned it in the hardest way. And Wesley Williams, who had spent so much of his life being careful not to take up space, learned that night that truth does not become smaller because it is spoken by someone in a server's vest. Years later, people would still talk about the gala. Some remembered the scandal. Some remembered the video. Some remembered the Hamiltons leaving through the side doors. But those who had stood close enough remembered something quieter. They remembered Savannah rolling into the center of the ballroom after being mocked and refusing to disappear. They remembered Wesley walking beside her while the music began again. They remembered the sound of wheels over polished wood, steady and unashamed. And maybe that was the part worth remembering most. Because cruelty often enters a room loudly. It wants witnesses. It wants laughter. It wants the weak to stay weak and the powerful to stay comfortable. But dignity does not need to be loud. Sometimes it looks like a young woman placing her hands on the wheels of her chair and moving forward. Sometimes it looks like a poor boy setting down a tray before it can shake out of his hands. Sometimes it looks like a father admitting he failed a worker, taking time before forgiving a school, changing rules it should have had all along, and a horse lowering her head to the girl everyone thought had been broken. Savannah was not broken. Wesley was not invisible. Marcus was not careless. And Trevor, for all his money, finally became what he had always feared becoming: small. Not because he lost status, because the truth revealed the size of his character. At the next gala, when new students came through Ashford Hall for the first time, they noticed the wide entrance, the smooth floor, the staff seated at guest tables, and the photograph hanging near the doors. Most did not know the whole story yet. They only saw a girl in a wheelchair touching a gray horse, a man with a cap in his hands, and a boy standing beside them in a black server's vest. Underneath the same 4 words remained: he did not look away. And in that house, after everything that had happened, that was enough to tell the truth.